So thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Colleen Gillis. I'm an attorney with Cooley, and I have had the pleasure of working with the Brambleton developer for close to 20 years on all sorts of land use and zoning applications in and around the community. I may have actually worked on an application that got your house approved. I'm joined this afternoon by Steve Schulte with Brambleton. He for sure worked on some application that had to do with your house and your home. And so he's got a bigger claim to fame. He's also been part of the Brambleton development team since before the first home went vertical in Brambleton. So he's got decades of experience here with Brambleton. As many of you know, we're here this afternoon to have a conversation about the Brambleton South Industrial Properties application that is currently before the Board of Supervisors and had its public hearing a couple weeks back and will be scheduled later this month for a vote by the Board of Supervisors at their February 15th business meeting. This is our fourth of 5 scheduled meetings, and we'll have one more meeting on Monday. 2 quick things before we get started. One, as I said earlier, if you've got questions during this presentation, please go ahead and put them in the chat to questions. It is a lot better for us just administratively if you don't send them directly to me or directly to Steve, because we are keeping an inventory of all of those questions so that we can make sure that we are addressing them in a frequently asked questions portion. Second, we are recording this presentation. It is substantially the same. We'll say probably different words in different orders, but it's substantially the same as the other 3 presentations that we gave last week and the week before to the community. All of these presentations are being recorded and being posted to the YouTube channel so that you can go back and review them. Finally, don't feel pressure if you go, we end this conversation, we end this meeting and you haven't, you come up with a question an hour later. Feel free at any point to send whatever questions you have to info@brambleton.com, info@brambleton.com. That's always an opportunity for sharing of questions, and we will get back to you as promptly as we can. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the presentation. If you've watched any of the other presentations on the YouTube channel, or you watched the Board of Supervisors public hearing, you'll note that a lot of this information has already been shared there, and so we've made some updates and some improvements, but it will probably not be terribly new to you if you've followed along so far. So, as mentioned, the application is called the Brambleton South Industrial Properties Rezoning, and the actual assigned number with the Loudoun County Department of Planning and Zoning is ZMap 2020-0003. Next slide. One of the questions that we often get with regard to this application is, where is the property that we're talking about? Where is it? Because people hear Brambleton and they might think that it is going in somebody's backyard, or we're putting it in the backyard of existing homes. That's not accurate. And so what this map identifies for you is that everything in red is a home that has been developed, constructed, and conveyed out to the end user. In most cases, this is for a purchaser of those units. And so what you can see is the vast majority of this Brambleton map with the Brambleton homes on it is red. That means those are all of the fully developed and built out areas of the community. Areas that are designated purple are the areas that are in some sort of progressive state of being sold to the greater public. So you can see, for example, on the east side of Loudoun County Parkway, as part of the Birchwood neighborhood, we've got some portions of the community here that are being sold. Some of them have been sold and some are still to be sold. And then we've got another area of purple that's up in the northwest corner of the community. The other color you'll see on this map is yellow, and yellow designates a portion of the community that has not yet started to develop and sell out. That's the next phase. So what you can see here, obviously, is that where the remaining really active selling and constructing is really happening in the northwest corner of the community. Everything that's dark green is commercial, And so you can orient yourself on this map, obviously, by finding the town center up at the intersection of North Star and Ryan, or perhaps the retail that's anchored by CVS and Tropical Smoothie in the southwest corner of the community. And then obviously we've got Brambleton Corner, the retail that's within the Birchwood community. The blue parcels are parcels that are as yet not developed and are in some form or fashion for a change to the approvals. And so parcel number 1 is located south of Birchwood in the Brambleton community. And that parcel today is zoned PDIP, Planned Development Industrial Park. And that PDIP zoning allows, among other uses, data centers. We recognize that the community probably does not want data centers right across Evergreen Mills Road from homes. And so as a result, we're currently in for a rezoning to rezone that property for residential development. We think it's just more compatible to do residential development across Evergreen Mills Road from existing residential development. Parcel number 2 is located in the southeast corner of North Star and Evergreen Mills Road. And that property was planned by the Board of Supervisors for residential development. And we're currently in for a rezoning to designate that property for residential development with a little bit of commercial as well that's there. The parcel we're going to talk about today is parcel number 3. And that is all the way to the southern portion of Brambleton. It's split down the center by Belmont Ridge Road. You have one parcel on the west and a larger parcel on the east. And it's just to the north of the intersection of Belmont Ridge Road and Arcola Mills Drive. It is parcel 3 that we're proposing to put the data centers we're here to talk about today. One last thing before we get off of this slide that's just really important to note is that when you look at this in the overall context, one thing to note, we'll talk about in a couple of slides, is you also have the overhead transmission lines that run north and south here. And then there are also transmission lines that run through the floodplain. What's really important to note as you look at this is that parcel number 3, is separated from the balance of Brambleton by a huge area of the Broad Run floodplain. That area there is quite wide, and we'll talk about that in slides to come. Next slide. So this is just a different, different perspective on that parcel. What is outlined in purple or fuchsia there is the parcel we were just talking about. You can see that it's split down the center by Belmont Ridge Road, and it's north of the intersection of Belmont Ridge Road and Arcola Mills Drive. But I really like this image because it demonstrates, really the context of this parcel on the south side of that floodplain. And the biggest thing to note, it's hard to miss it, is the runway for Dulles Airport. And so you can see that this parcel is directly within the flight path from that runway from Dulles Airport. As a result, it's within the 65 LDN, which is the area designated by the county as the loudest. It's got the most noise that you would hear from planes flying overhead. But additionally, as we look at this parcel, you see data centers at the intersection of Loudoun County Parkway and Route 606. You've got the Google data center campus that's just to the south of that. You've got additional data centers. This is all industrial uses in Dulles Trade Center West. And so you've got a lot of what I would consider to be, the more industrial uses that are along Arcola Mills Drive and this portion of the county, for good reason, because of the airport. Next slide. But this is the zoning in this area. It's really important, we thought, to share with you all what exists today in terms of the zoning. Everything that's this purple color is designated PDGI, Planned Development General Industrial. And that is one of the heavier zoning districts in the county, meaning it allows for heavier industrial uses. What we're asking for is PDIP, and PDIP is a lighter industrial use category, can kind of flex between office and lighter industrial uses. And then we've got the area that's in green, that's CR1, Countryside Residential 1, which means that were it not within the 65 LDN, and you can see the 65 LDN by these white dashed lines here. If we're not within the 65 LDN, we could subdivide the property and put residential. Unfortunately, because of that LDN, because of that noise contour being located, mapped onto the property, we can't add residential in this location. The last thing before we get off of this slide that's really, I think, important to note is that the PDGI portion of Brambleton that you can see outlined in purple on the east side of Belmont Ridge Road, that property was part of the original Brambleton entitlement that was approved in the late 80s and early 90s. So general industrial uses have been long zoned in this portion of Brambleton. This is not a change. We are making significant improvements to the approvals by the application that we're bringing forward today, but it's important to note that there is a by right entitlement, meaning Board of Supervisors couldn't stop it, of approximately 1.8 million square feet of data center development today as a result of that PDGI zoning. Next slide. And it's because of all of these factors that the county, when they went through their planning process that wrapped up in June of 2019, that they designated this property for suburban industrial mineral extraction. What that means is that the county's vision, the long-term vision for this property, is that it would be developed in accordance with the place type called suburban industrial mineral extraction. And that's for all of the areas that you can see on this aerial image that are that blue washed color. Next slide. And suburban industrial mineral extraction, this is straight from the county's comprehensive plan, shows what sort of uses they'd like to see on these parcels. What you can see on the top are some images of what they think is suburban industrial / mineral extraction uses. And so core uses, general and heavy manufacturing and assembly, warehousing, contractor with outdoor storage, data centers, fleet and equipment sales and service, research and development, outdoor storage, public utilities, quarry, and outdoor manufacturing. Those are the core uses. That's what they would expect the county would expect to see on this property. When we look at this, we think that the one that is most compatible with this portion of our community is data centers. Data centers being known as a notoriously low trip generator, so generates very few vehicular trips on the roads. And also, from a school capacity issue, obviously it's not generating school-age children, and is a relatively quiet and good neighbor. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, the Broad Run floodplain goes through this property in a significant way. And so we wanted to show you how this creates an additional area of separation from the balance of Brambleton and the parcels that we talked about earlier as a result of this floodplain. Parcel number 1 that I described earlier is located right here. This area of floodplain is not in the widest part, not in the narrowest part, approximately 800 feet wide. And that 800 feet of depth is creating a huge separation between what will happen from a development perspective on the north side of the floodplain with what's happening on this property. Next slide. But it's not just floodplain, like floodplain being a flat area to which the water runs. It's also heavily wooded. Everything that's designated here in purple is tree conservation area, established mature hardwoods that the developer is committing to preserve as part of this application. And we think it's really important to note that. But just to be clear now, as we're looking at the actual development envelopes here, we want to be clear about what it is that could be developed on both sides of Belmont Ridge Road. So first, you can see that there is a dark black line, it's kind of jagged, that runs around the property. This is our development envelope, which is to say, outside of this dark black line, only within the area that's crosshatched, right? We can't develop outside of the dark black line, and within the area that is crosshatched is where we can do our development. And it's really important to note that we have constrained that area. In addition to just respecting the floodplain, we're also committing to a 50-foot buffer to the floodplain to preserve the environmental benefits of that floodplain. And you can see that this dark black line is on both sides of Belmont Ridge Road, and it's only within that crosshatched area that we can develop. When we were at the Board of Supervisors, we had a proposal. Our proposal at that time was for 4 million square feet of data center development on the east side of Loudoun County Parkway. Excuse me, on the east side of Belmont Ridge Road. since we were at the Board of Supervisors, we've reduced the 4 million that we were asking for, and we've reduced it in half. So what we're asking for is now approval to do 2 million square feet. We've reduced it by half. By reducing it by half, obviously we're reducing the already limited traffic impacts, but we're also limiting the development potential here. Additionally, on the west side of Loudoun County Park, of Belmont Ridge Road, I've got Loudoun County Parkway on the brain, we were asking for 700,000 square feet. We are now asking for 350,000 square feet on the west side of Belmont Ridge Road. And so we've reduced the possible maximum density on this property by half. But additionally, we are only asking for data centers on the east side of Belmont Ridge Road. And we have actually proffered out data centers on the west side of Belmont Ridge Road. So the only place we can do data centers is on the east side, and you will not have any data centers closest to Evermont Trace on the west side of Belmont Ridge Road. Additionally, on the west side of Belmont Ridge Road, we've proffered out, which means we cannot develop monopoles. The last question that we got through this process that we've addressed, maybe that's the last question, but one of the questions that we were asked to address is the location of a possible substation. We have also committed that any substation will be located in this northeast corner of the development envelope on the east side of Belmont Ridge Road. Locating it there for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, then it shouldn't be broadly visible from Belmont Ridge Road or Arcola Mills Drive. We're also using the existing trees that surround it to further block it. But most importantly, we're locating it in that way because you can see this red line that runs through the property here. Those are the overhead transmission lines. And so locating it there is as close as possible to those transmission lines, resulting in an efficient takedown of the power to serve this data center should a substation be needed. Next slide. As we look at the floodplain and we look at the tree cover, you might go, okay, so there's some environmental aspects to this application. You'd be 100% right. We have a department within Loudoun County called the Natural Resources Team, and they have looked at and scrubbed this application, and we have no outstanding issues or comments from them. So, which means that they are fully satisfied that we are doing what we need to do to protect the environmental resources on the property. And we're doing that through, as I've mentioned already, a significant tree conservation area, a buffer to the floodplain. It's called a risk-car buffer, river and stream corridor resources buffer, multiple low impact development measures, pervious parking spaces. We're also doing surveys of habitats that could be existing on the property, and we're committing to do those habitat surveys. We're also committing to use native plantings on the property. So nothing that would be invasive from a planting perspective. And then we're also restricting the hours and days of testing any equipment on the property. Next slide. But in addition to just being very sensitive to the environmental resources, we're also making additional comments to the building design, parking lot screening, pedestrian and bicycle facilities, on-site employer and visitor amenity spaces, areas for employees to gather. And we're also dedicating a 300-foot broad run linear park easement. What this will facilitate is a huge wide walking path or biking path through that floodplain that we talked about earlier. It's a really great opportunity. It's a beautiful area with a lot of, as I mentioned earlier, existing hardwoods, and that will be dedicated to the Department of Parks and Recreation so that there can be a continuous trail connection from this property all the way through the floodplain and up to the metro station and beyond. Next slide. You may be familiar with this berm that exists on the south side of Belmont Ridge Road, on the south side of the Performing Arts Center, near the barn that you might see is being renovated. And we thought it was really important to note this. This berm is between 22 and 24 feet tall. 50,000 cubic yards of dirt has been used to create this. And additionally, really mature trees. You can tell that these are mature trees, even from the fact that we took the picture of them in the wintertime. And so the trees lack leaves, the deciduous trees lack leaves. You can tell that these are established, mature trees that will continue to grow and get larger. Next slide. And we thought it was really important to note that this berm exists on the north side of the floodplain, south of Evergreen Mills Road. What you can see in the foreground of both pictures is an area for future development that could be developed there, but it gives you a sense of the scale and the distance and the separation of the north side of the floodplain and how big it is. You can drive out there today, go take a look at it. But beyond the berm, you can see those high transmission, those power lines that are running through the floodplain back here. And you get a sense for how far away they look by how small they are in the picture. Next slide. These were the elevations that we shared with the county as part of our processing of our application. And we heard feedback from the community and also some of the supervisors that they really would like us to see, they would like to see a commitment to higher design aesthetic. Next slide. So we did just that. So since we were at the Board of Supervisors in mid-January, we've upgraded our commitments to our design. What you can see with this is a building that looks a lot more like an office building with all of the additional glass that's on these buildings and the varying facade articulation. So it's not just a flat front, doesn't look like a boring big box. We anticipate, based on discussions with the end user, we are not developing them ourselves, but based on discussions with the end user, the contract purchaser, that it's the short side of the buildings, what you can see on the bottom half of this slide, that would face Belmont Ridge Road. Obviously, looks very, very attractive. Next slide. But it's hard sometimes to take those images and really translate them into what they would look like every single day. And so what we've prepared are two perspective renderings that would demonstrate to you all what it's going to look like. Now, before we start and look at those perspective renderings, I do want to pause here. The first image we'll look at is from the intersection of Belmont Ridge Road and Arcola Mills Drive. And you can see, the perspective. We're looking from that direction, looking to the northeast. The second one we're going to look at is B. So as if you're driving down to Arcola Mills Drive from Belmont Ridge Road, and what would you see in that direction? But most importantly on this slide, before we get off of it, one of the things that I do want to point out is that you can see the area that is bright green that wraps around the frontages of Belmont Ridge Road and Arcola Mills Drive. We will be installing a berm, minimum of 6 feet in height, with landscaping to be planted on it that will additionally screen the data center from those two roads. What's important to note, you're about to look at the pictures, those pictures do not show the berm. Next slide. So these pictures don't show the berm, but we are committing to a berm. That berm would be exactly where I showed you in the last slide. And this is that first view from Arcola Mills Drive and Belmont Ridge Road looking back. Now, these are mature trees. The trees planted there on day one will not be this mature, but what this picture is lacking is that berm that will lift all of the bottoms of these trees up from what you can see here. Next slide. And this is looking in the other direction. This is looking down Belmont Ridge Road with Arcola Mills Drive in the background there. And again, missing the berm, but showing you the approximate quantity of trees that would be here at full maturity. Won't immediately be there, but those trees again will be lifted up. We realize that once we put this landscaping in, it's hard to see what those buildings would look like. So next slide. We did also pull together a rendering from our contract purchaser. This is a rendering that they used in a different application that does not have the commitment to the berms, does not have the commitment to the landscaping. And we wanted to use this so that you all could get a sense for, okay, so what is it going to look like until those trees grow up with, if it's a little bit, if it's taking some time. And this gives you a really good understanding and a really good picture of how high quality those data centers look, and that they don't look like some of the other data centers elsewhere in the county that are less articulated and don't commit to as high of a design. This we think is really attractive And the earth tones also that you can see here, we think are much more in keeping with the design aesthetic of Brambleton as a whole. Next slide. One of the things that we also heard about through the process is Belmont Ridge Road, and I drive it. I don't live far from Brambleton. I drive it. The Belmont Ridge Road really needs to be improved and widened, and we hear you. And so those other two parcels, parcel 1 and parcel 2, are in for a rezoning, and it's with that rezoning that if it's approved, that we would improve Belmont Ridge Road to a 4-lane section. And part of the reason why we're putting it with that application is, as I mentioned earlier, the Broad Run floodplain is roughly 800 feet wide, meaning that the bridge that we would need to construct to span the Broad Run floodplain is, we anticipate to be an approximately 25, 30 or more $1 million improvement. And so this application doesn't generate enough revenue to do that, but we are coming into the Board of Supervisors later this year and asking for their support to do this improvement in connection with that rezoning. But there are improvements. You can see the additional striping that's happening on Belmont Ridge Road as with this image. Next slide. The bigger improvements that we're doing are really at the intersection of Belmont Ridge Road and Arcola Mills Drive. And so what you can see here is the extensive improvements, additional striping, additional lanes to improve the intersection of Belmont Ridge Road and Arcola Mills Drive. I think one of the biggest things that we've seen and heard from people about is the intersection as you travel west on Arcola Mills Drive. This intersection is wider such that there is a dedicated left turn lane, a dedicated through lane, and a dedicated right turn lane. I sat at this intersection last night and was hoping it was already in place, because sat behind somebody who was waiting to make that left turn into Briarfield for what felt like forever. This obviously would reduce those conflicts and would allow for the queuing to Briarfield to happen more smoothly and not back up traffic all the way down Arcola Mills Drive. Next slide. So if you've got questions, please put them in the chat to questions. If for some reason you've got a hop, or you've got, you think of a question after this call, please send us the questions to info@brambleton.com. We will absolutely get back to you. We will also give you more information. We will also answer it as part of the community. Additionally, I wanted to mention on the topic of questions that previously asked questions have been answered and posted on your community website. So you can get a sense for what other questions have been asked and how we responded to them. So we'll wait. We haven't gotten any questions just yet, but we will certainly wait for a couple of minutes to see if you've got questions. Okay. What are you trying to zone for lot 2? Where is that in the rezoning process? Great question. So parcel number 1 and parcel number 2 are a part of the same zoning application. And we are asking for residential on both parcels to be compatible with what's adjacent to it and north of it on Shreveport. On Evergreen Mills Road, used to be called Shreveport. Parcel 2, though, also has a component of commercial development as well on that. So you think of it as small scale retail as well on that parcel. And they're both in the same rezoning process. We are working very diligently to get to public hearing later this year and later in 2022. Okay. Is there a potential buyer already lined up for proposed lot 3? We do have a contract purchaser. The contract purchaser constructs data centers, and they don't have an end user identified yet. So we don't know who is going to go into the data center, but they would build the data center. Okay. If not, okay, so yes, we do have a contract purchaser lined up, and we would expect that they will move relatively quickly to start development. So one of the things that we think is a benefit to the order that we're doing this is that those data centers will be under development or constructed by the time that any residential on the north side of the floodplain, pursuant to those rezoning applications, were to go to market or to be sold, et cetera. Everybody will understand the circumstances of that situation. Okay. Well, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. We know how busy everybody is, to stay apprised of what's happening in the community. These couple of questions, we'll add them to our frequently asked questions portion on the developer's website. And then if you have questions that come up after this meeting, please, info@brambleton.com. info@brambleton.com. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you very much for taking your time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
See you.